Welcome to today's explainer. If you've ever felt completely overwhelmed and wanted to figure out how to optimize the way you learn, work, and just tackle massive challenges, well, you are in exactly the right place. Today, we're diving into a genuinely fascinating study published on November 15th, 2021 in the journal Emotion. It's titled Thriving Under Pressure: The Effects of Stress-Related Wise Interventions on Affect, Sleep, and Exam Performance for College Students from Disadvantaged Backgrounds. Authored by J. Parker Goyer and a really incredible team of researchers, this paper pretty much transforms our entire understanding of academic stress. We're going to dig right into their data to see how some surprisingly tiny psychological shifts can radically alter how we experience high-pressure situations. So, here is our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the study of student stress. Second, designing the stress experiment. Third, how they measured affect and sleep. Fourth, the findings and affect sizes. And finally, decoupling stress from performance. All right, part one, the study of student stress, identifying the problem. I want you to consider this exact quote directly from the paper. They write, "Wise interventions improve outcomes by helping individuals construe situations more adaptively." Let's unpack that for a second. We all know college is incredibly stressful, right? But for students coming from disadvantaged backgrounds, folks who might be navigating a massive cultural mismatch or balancing intense academics with serious financial pressures or dealing with stereotype threat, that baseline stress is massively magnified. The researchers wanted to figure out, how can we help these students not just survive, but actually thrive? Psychologists use these things called wise interventions to help. And these aren't massive multi-year tutoring programs. They are targeted, brief psychological exercises designed to help people basically reinterpret or adaptively construe the huge challenges right in front of them. Now, the researchers wanted to test two completely different ways of dealing with stress. On one side, we have the historical narrative, right? The stress management approach. This is what pretty much all of us are taught growing up. It views stress as inherently debilitating. It's something harmful that absolutely must be avoided, or at least mitigated with things like deep breathing and relaxation techniques. But on the other side, we have the stress is enhancing mindset. This approach is completely different. It doesn't try to hide from the stress. Instead, it views stress as a really powerful tool that can be utilized to facilitate growth, improve your performance, and build resilience. It's literally about accepting the stress and using that biological energy to propel yourself forward. Moving right along to section 2, designing the stress experiment, the setup. To figure out which of these approaches actually works best in the real world, Goyer and her colleagues put together a really rigorous experiment at a highly selective university. They took 140 incoming freshmen from disadvantaged backgrounds and randomly assigned them to one of two groups. 70 students were put into the mindset group, where they were explicitly taught that stress is enhancing. Another 70 were placed into the management group, where they learned those traditional stress reduction techniques we just talked about. And just to make sure the data was totally rock solid, they also tracked a comparison group of 74 students from the general campus population who got absolutely no training at all. What's wild here is the timeline. The intervention wasn't some long, drawn-out semester class. It was literally a single 90-minute workshop right before their freshman year, followed by just one brief fall booster session. That's it. Then, the researchers basically just stepped back and waited 10 whole months until the absolute crucible of the academic year hit: spring final exam week. You know, that magical time fueled entirely by panic and bad coffee. This is the very first time these students' grades are permanently impacting their college GPA. It's a high-stakes, ridiculously high-stress environment. The team wanted to see if a 90-minute workshop from almost a year ago could actually survive the ultimate pressure cooker. Which brings us to section 3, measurements, effect and sleep during exam week. So how do you accurately measure a student's stress during finals week without, just adding to their massive workload? The researchers used a pretty clever technique called daily experience sampling through a mobile app. Every single day for 5 days straight, the students' phones would ping them twice. They used the PAN-ASS scale to measure positive and negative affect, which is basically just the fancy psychological term for our emotional states. They'd ask them to rate feelings on a scale from excited and confident to anxious and angry. On top of that, they tracked exact sleep hours using items from the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index, and eventually collected their self-reported final exam grades. This gave the researchers a really high-resolution, real-time picture of exactly what was happening physiologically and psychologically. Okay, let's get into the good stuff. Section 4, findings and effect sizes. The results are in. Let's kick this off with a major statistical finding. During that grueling week of final exams, the mindset group, the ones who are taught that stress is actually enhancing, exhibited significantly higher positive affect than the comparison group, and the effect size was a Cohen's d of 0.63. Now, in psychology, that is a highly substantial difference. It means these specific students were feeling significantly more excited, more proud, and more determined right in the middle of all the academic chaos. And again, this is all stemming from an intervention they took almost a year prior. Now, here is what is absolutely fascinating when you look at all their emotional outcomes. The negative affect, the anxiety, the worry, all those bad feelings, was basically identical across all three groups. The stresses-enhancing mindset did not magically make their anxiety disappear. They felt just as much negative emotion as everybody else. But at the exact same time, they experienced a massive boost in positive affect. They didn't suppress their stress, they acknowledged it, they accepted those negative feelings, and then they actively utilized that high arousal state to fuel their determination. They literally turned their stress into an asset. We definitely need to talk about the sleep data too, because this really caught the researchers by surprise. You would naturally assume that the stress management group, the folks explicitly taught to prioritize healthy habits like sleep to reduce their stress, would sleep the most, right? Actually, scratch that. They slept the least, averaging just 6.54 hours a night. It seems like the pressure of trying to perfectly manage their time, study for their finals, and somehow force themselves to relax might have totally backfired, leading to way later bedtimes. Meanwhile, the mindset group maintained a very healthy 7.02 hours of sleep, which was practically identical to the baseline comparison group. By accepting the stress rather than actively fighting it, they were able to rest just as well as their peers. Before we dive into the actual final exam grades, I really want to highlight this verbatim quote from the authors. They note that mindset and management approaches both confer benefits in certain circumstances. We're analyzing the data impartially here, and it's super clear the authors aren't saying time management or deep breathing are useless. Not at all. Both interventions successfully sustained their core lessons over 10 whole months. But when you find yourself in an unavoidable, high-stakes crucible like finals week, where stress literally cannot be avoided or easily reduced, changing your underlying mindset about the very nature of that stress seems to provide a really unique kind of emotional armor. Which brings us to Section 5, Decoupling Stress and Performance, the Big Reveal. This right here is the most profound finding of the entire explainer. Normally, without any training, the data shows a strict downward slope. As exam week stress goes up, exam performance goes straight down. The stress actively drags down their grades. But for the students who receive the stress training, either the mindset or the management intervention, that downward trend noticeably flattened out. When stress levels were at their highest, those trained students simply did not suffer the same steep drop in their academic performance. Let's actually put some exact numbers to that trend. For the control group, the negative association between stress and performance was very significant, with a D of negative 0.32. Now, the management intervention was helpful. It cut that negative association almost in half, reducing it by 48%. But the mindset intervention? It was an absolute game changer. It decoupled stress from performance almost entirely, reducing the negative association by an unbelievable 75%. It literally made the relationship between feeling stressed and getting a bad grade statistically non-significant. The stress was absolutely still there, but it no longer had the power to dictate their success. This 2021 study beautifully demonstrates that a brief, highly targeted intervention can completely change the trajectory for students navigating incredibly tough, unfamiliar environments. They didn't need to eliminate the pressure. They just needed a psychological framework to utilize it. So I'll leave you with this thought. If simply changing our mindset can completely decouple the feeling of stress from the outcome of failure, how might you rethink the next big challenge in your own life?